The first time he held me, his hands were rough but purposeful. There's a certain tenderness in calloused palms that smooth skin can never replicate. I remember the weight of his fingers, how they traced my length with reverence, testing my flexibility. Summer mornings on Lake Michigan have a particular scent, part algae, part promise. For 12 years, that was our ritual. His truck would rumble down the gravel path before dawn, headlights cutting through mist that hovered just above the water's surface. I'd be carefully removed from my case, assembled with practiced precision. The click of my pieces connecting was always followed by his exhale, as if we both were coming alive together. The dock creaked beneath his weight. Sometimes frost would cover the wooden planks in early spring, and his boots would leave temporary imprints as he walked. I felt the cold air through my guides as he'd prepare the line, his breath visible in small clouds that disappeared into the pale morning light. Birds would call to each other from the distant shore, witnesses to our solitude. Time wasn't measured in hours there, but in casts, in gentle tugs, in the occasional triumphant catch. His laugh would bounce across the water when we succeeded together, low and genuine, a sound meant only for me and the lake. He spoke to me, not in the way people talk to pets or plants, but as if I were an extension of himself. Just a little more to the left, he'd whisper, adjusting my angle against the rising sun. That's where they're hiding today. His confidence would flow through his grip, through me, through the line, as if we shared one mind. When the storms came, he'd shelter me, wiping raindrops from my surface with the same handkerchief his father had given him. It was blue once, I think, but had faded to the color of morning fog. In the beginning, he brought others, a son with eager hands, a wife with patient smiles who'd pack sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. The boy would bounce on the dock, disturbing our rhythm, but the man never minded. "Slow down," he'd say, guiding small fingers to hold me properly. "Feel the balance." Later, it was just him. Sometimes he'd mention the boy, college, then a job in Arizona. "Too dry for fishing," he'd say with a half smile that never quite reached his eyes. Some days he'd sit for hours without a single cast, just holding me, watching the water ripple against the shore while the sun tracked its way across the sky. It happened gradually, like most important things do. His grip changed first, less steady, more hesitant. The truck still came, but later in the morning, then only on weekends. He began forgetting things, the special lure with the red stripe, the thermos of coffee that used to steam in the cold air. Once, he left me propped against a tree for several hours while he sat staring at his phone, his face illuminated by its blue glow in the gathering dusk. The autumn, when everything shifted, was unusually warm. The leaves held their color longer, refusing to acknowledge the coming change. I remember the morning clearly, an October Tuesday with geese flying overhead in perfect formation. He'd caught nothing, but that wasn't unusual anymore. What was different was the heaviness in his movements as he began to pack up. He held me longer than necessary, his thumb tracing a scratch near my handle. Then he did something strange. He cast one final time, with no bait, no purpose. The line arced beautifully against the copper sky before settling on the water's surface. He watched it float there, disturbed only by gentle ripples, for nearly 30 minutes without reeling it back. "I don't feel it anymore," he whispered to the lake, to himself, to me. 3 days later, he returned and fished mechanically, his movements precise but empty, like someone following instructions for a dance they no longer heard the music to. I remember everything about him, the small scar on his right thumb from a hook that caught him instead of fish, the way he'd tuck his chin against his chest when concentrating on tying a difficult knot, how his wedding ring would catch the morning light and send tiny prisms dancing across my surface. His voice had a particular quality at dawn, raspier, more honest somehow. "Just you and me today, old friend," he'd say, and I'd feel the gentle pressure of his hands adjusting my drag. There were signs looking back. The pill bottle that rattled in his pocket where fishing line used to be. Phone calls he'd take walking away from the water, his free hand rubbing the back of his neck, a tremor in his fingers that hadn't been there before. Once, standing at the edge of the dock, he lost his balance, just for a moment, but his face afterward held a new kind of fear. The scents are what I miss most. His aftershave mixed with coffee, the worms in their container of soil, beef jerky he'd chew thoughtfully while waiting for a bite. The last day smelled different, antiseptic, foreign. He'd come straight from somewhere else. His sleeves still rolled up like he'd forgotten to adjust them. No tackle box that day, just me and a simple lure. The water was exceptionally still, a perfect mirror reflecting clouds that didn't move. 3 hours we sat there while he ran his thumb repeatedly over my handle, wearing a groove neither of us would ever forget. It's been 2 years since I've felt water. The case he kept me in is dark and dry, propped in the corner of a garage that smells of motor oil and forgotten projects. I hear his voice sometimes, muffled through walls, different now, strained phone calls, arguments about treatments and options. Occasionally, footsteps approach, pause by my case, then retreat. Yesterday the case opened. Light flooded in, temporarily blinding after so much darkness. The hands that lifted me weren't his, smoother, younger, but with a familiar shape to the fingers. "Dad's asking for this," a voice said. The son had returned, grown now, smelling of airport terminals and responsibility. He handled me awkwardly, this tool of patience held by a man who had built a life on urgency. We drove to a place that smelled of disinfectant and flowers well past their prime. The hallway was long and quiet except for the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum. In a room at the end, by a window overlooking nothing in particular, he sat, thinner, grayer, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. His hands trembled more noticeably now, but when I was placed across his lap, his fingers found their familiar positions automatically, muscle memory outlasting whatever was failing elsewhere. "I want to tell you about the green heron," he said to his son, his hand moving along my length as if casting, though we were far from any water. Smartest bird on the lake. Would drop twigs to bait fish. For an hour he talked. Not about illness or regrets, but about dawn mists and the perfect cast. About the weight of a largemouth bass fighting against the line. With each story, his voice grew stronger, as if each memory physically rebuilt something inside him that had begun to crumble. They bring me to him every few days now. I haven't touched water in so long I've forgotten the feeling of being immersed, of being purposeful. But I remember him, and he remembers us. Some days he can barely speak, but his hands still move in the familiar rhythm. Cast, wait, reel. His son watches, learning something he'd never bothered to see before. Yesterday the boy, the man now, asked if he could take me to the lake again. He'd want that, the son said to someone I couldn't see. He always said his rod had a perfect memory for where the fish were hiding. I don't know if I'll feel the water again, but I know this. I held his dreams once, suspended them above the surface of possibility. I felt his joy pulse through my spine in the moment before a catch. I carried his silence when words failed him. Between my fibers lives the imprint of hands that knew exactly what they wanted, then somehow forgot, then remembered again too late. The mystery wasn't in why he lost his will to fish. The mystery was how something so essential to a person's spirit could slip away unnoticed like mist, burning off a lake at midday, until one morning you look out and realize the surface has been clear for longer than you can recall. I am still here, and so is he in his way. Some tools are never really just tools. Some are witnesses, confidants, extensions of the hands that hold them. In the dark of the case, I can still feel the perfect arc of our best cast, that moment of pure potential, when the line hangs suspended above the water and anything is possible.